Our strict mother was pressuring her son to accept an arranged marriage. She chose a deaf-mute girl for him. Initially, he felt quite unsure and full of doubts. But on their wedding night, she said something that brought him to tears before watching. This heartwarming story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more touching stories. William Thompson adjusted his tie for the third time as he observed his reflection in the elevator mirror. The 28-year-old architect was heading up to the penthouse of the commercial building where his mother, Eleanor Thompson, ran one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. It wasn't common for her to summon him so urgently, especially on a Thursday, when he was usually immersed in important projects at the office. The elevator doors opened directly into the presidential reception area, where Margaret, his mother's secretary of over 2 decades, awaited him with a restrained smile on her lips. "Your mother is waiting, William. You may go in." As he passed through the double doors of the office, he found Eleanor standing near the panoramic window, which offered a privileged view of the city. She was dressed in an elegant navy blue tailored suit, her graying hair perfectly styled in a low bun. "Son, sit down. We need to talk about your future." William felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that tone well. It was the same one his mother used when she was about to make an announcement that would completely change the course of things. "You're 28, William. You're an excellent architect with a bright future ahead, but it's time to start thinking about starting a family. As the president of the group, I need to ensure the continuity of our business." "Mom, please, not this marriage talk again." "This isn't just talk, William. It's a decision that's already been made." Eleanor sat down across from him, placing a brown leather folder on the table. "I met an extraordinary family during my last trip to New York. The Kavanaghs own one of the largest hotel chains in the world, and they have an only daughter, Elizabeth." William ran his hands over his face, trying to process the information. "And let me guess, you've already planned everything?" "Actually, yes. The Kavanaghs are arriving in the United States next week, and I've already arranged an introductory dinner. Elizabeth is an exceptional young woman, graduated in visual arts from NYU, a talented photographer. And what's the catch? There's always one." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, a rare sight. Elizabeth was born deaf, William, but that hasn't stopped her from achieving everything she's wanted in life. She communicates perfectly through writing and lip reading, and she's fluent in both American and Brazilian Sign Language. Silence filled the office. William stared at his mother, trying to understand if this was some kind of elaborate joke. "You're telling me you've arranged a marriage for me with someone I've never met, and who's deaf?" "I'm telling you, I've found the ideal partner for you, someone who shares similar values to ours, and who will bring immeasurable benefits to both families." "Elizabeth's hearing condition is just a detail." William stood up abruptly. "A detail? Mom, how am I supposed to communicate with her? How are we going to build a life together?" "The same way thousands of couples do every day, with respect, dedication, and a willingness to learn. In fact, I've already arranged for a private sign language tutor for you to start lessons tomorrow." The young architect walked to the window, observing the city's movement below. His mind buzzed with countless thoughts and worries. "What if I refuse?" Eleanor approached her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "William, you know I've always done everything with your best interest in mind. Trust me one more time. Give this possibility a chance. Get to know Elizabeth first, and then we'll talk." That night, lying in bed, William couldn't sleep. He grabbed his phone and began researching the Kavanagh family. The articles confirmed everything his mother had said. They were indeed one of the most influential families in the hospitality industry. He found a few photos from social events, where Elizabeth appeared, always elegant with a subtle smile on her lips. The next morning, still reluctant, William met with Paul Sanders, the sign language tutor his mother had hired. To his surprise, the first lessons were fascinating. Paul explained that sign language was much more than gestures. It was a complete language with its own grammar and complexity. "Communication goes far beyond spoken words," Paul explained. "Deaf people develop a unique perception of the world. They feel vibrations, read body language with impressive precision, and have an extraordinary ability to connect through eye contact." Throughout the week, as he prepared for the introductory dinner, William found himself increasingly curious about Elizabeth. What would her inner voice be like? How did she perceive the world? What would it be like to fall in love with someone without ever hearing their voice? On the eve of the big dinner, Eleanor handed her son a small photo album. They were Elizabeth's works, urban images captured with a unique sensitivity, playing with light and shadow in a way William had never seen before. "See? She finds beauty where many only see the ordinary," Eleanor commented. William spent the night studying those photographs, trying to understand the woman behind the lens. There was something special about that way of seeing the world, something that intrigued him and, though he wouldn't admit it yet, drew him in. The day of the dinner arrived faster than he expected. While getting ready, he mentally repeated the few signs he had learned during the week. His heart raced, a mix of fear and curiosity he couldn't quite explain. That night, his life would change forever. What he didn't yet know was that this change would be far deeper and more significant than anyone could have imagined. The restaurant Helena had chosen for the introductory dinner occupied the top floor of one of the city's most luxurious buildings. William arrived deliberately 15 minutes early, nervously adjusting his shirt cuffs as he gazed at the illuminated city through the windows of the private dining room. "You're too tense," commented Eleanor, who had noticed her son checking his watch for the third time in less than 5 minutes. "Relax, everything will be fine." Before William could respond, the doors to the dining room opened. Robert and Marina Kavanaugh entered first, followed by their daughter Elizabeth. William felt his heart instantly race. Elizabeth was even more striking in person than in the photographs he had seen. She wore an emerald green dress that accentuated her deep brown eyes, and her black hair cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders. But what caught William's attention the most was her gaze. There was a unique blend of strength and delicacy in it. The formal introductions began with handshakes and polite smiles. When it was his turn to greet Elizabeth, William took a deep breath and made the sign for "nice to meet you" that he had learned during the week. Her eyes lit up with surprise and satisfaction. Elizabeth pulled a small notepad and pen from her pocket, writing in elegant handwriting. "Are you learning ASL? That makes me very happy." William smiled, taking the notepad to reply, "I started a week ago. I still have a lot to learn, but I want to make an effort for us to communicate well." During dinner, William discovered that Elizabeth had a unique way of expressing herself. Even without spoken words, she could convey her ideas with surprising clarity, alternating between writing, some basic signs William already knew, and eloquent facial expressions. Between exchanges of written messages, William began to notice small details about her. How her eyes narrowed slightly when she smiled, how her hands danced gracefully in the air as she signed, how she gave her full attention to each person communicating with her. "Elizabeth has a photography studio in New York," Marina Kavanaugh remarked with evident pride. "Her exhibitions always attract important critics from the art world." William seized the opportunity to write in the notepad, "I've seen some of your photographs. They're impressive. How do you manage to capture such unique moments?" Elizabeth smiled and began writing a longer response. "When you can't hear the world, you learn to see it differently. Every shadow, every expression, every movement tells a story. Photography allows me to share my silent perspective of the world." While their parents discussed business, William and Elizabeth continued their silent conversation through the notepad. He discovered that she loved modern architecture, had a passion for jazz. Even though she couldn't hear it, she felt the vibrations of the music and dreamed of holding a photography exhibition in the United States. At one point, Elizabeth wrote something that caught William by surprise. "I know this is an arranged marriage and you probably have your reservations. I also have my own, but we can turn this into something genuine if we give each other a chance." Her honesty completely disarmed him. William responded, "You're right. I admit I was scared at first, but you're different from anything I imagined." The dinner went surprisingly well. When it was time to say goodbye, Elizabeth handed William an envelope. "Open it when you get home," she wrote. Back at his apartment, William opened the envelope with curiosity. Inside was a black and white photograph she had taken that same night through the reflection of the restaurant window. In the image, captured, Without him noticing, William appeared gazing at the city with a thoughtful expression. The photo was accompanied by a note. "Sometimes silence allows us to see beyond appearances. This was my first impression of you, someone who, like me, is searching for something deeper in life. I hope we can discover it together." William spent a long time contemplating the photograph. It was impressive how she had managed to capture such an intimate and revealing moment. For the first time since his mother had announced the arranged marriage, he felt a glimmer of hope. That night, before going to sleep, William signed up for an online intensive ASL course. He also began researching photography and deaf culture, wanting to better understand Elizabeth's world. His last thought, before falling asleep, was the image of her smile when he had made that first sign of "nice to meet you." The next day, he woke up to a text message from Elizabeth. "Would you like to visit my temporary studio here in the United States? I promise to teach you some photography tricks." William smiled at his phone. Maybe his mother was right after all. Sometimes the best stories begin in the most unexpected ways. On Saturday morning, William parked his car in front of an old mansion in the city's historic district. The building, an early 20th century construction, had been completely restored, maintaining its original facade but with a modern interior. It was there that Elizabeth had set up her temporary studio during her stay in the United States. As he rang the doorbell, William noticed that in addition to the traditional sound, soft lights flickered inside the mansion, an adaptation for deaf people. Elizabeth opened the door wearing a paint-stained denim jumpsuit, her hair casually tied up in a high bun. It was a completely different version of the elegant woman he had met at dinner, and William was surprised to find her even more beautiful this way. "Good morning," he signed, proud to have practiced this basic greeting. Elizabeth smiled widely and gestured for him to follow her. The interior of the studio was a spacious, bright space with large windows that allowed generous amounts of natural light. The white walls were covered with photographs in various stages of editing. On a side table, there were professional photography equipment carefully arranged. Elizabeth picked up a tablet and typed, "This is my little creative refuge." "What do you think?" William looked around, admiring the atmosphere of the place. "It's incredible," he replied, typing on his own phone. "Each photograph tells a different story." She led him through the space, showing her latest works. There was a particular series that caught William's attention. Photographs of people in moments of silent connection. An elderly couple sitting on a park bench, children playing without exchanging words, a street musician completely absorbed in his music. "How do you manage to capture such intimate moments?" William asked through the tablet. Elizabeth smiled and began typing a more elaborate response. "When you can't hear, you develop a different sensitivity to visual details. I notice things that many people overlook, a fleeting glance, a subtle gesture, the tension or relaxation of a body. For me, silence is not absence, it is presence." She then picked up one of her professional cameras and gestured for William to come closer. Through a mix of basic signs, intuitive gestures, and typed messages, she began explaining the fundamentals of photography. William was surprised by how easily they could communicate, despite their linguistic limitations. At one point, Elizabeth positioned herself behind William, adjusting his hands on the camera to teach him the correct angle. He felt her soft perfume and the warmth of her presence, a closeness that made his heart unexpectedly race. They spent the entire morning photographing objects around the studio, with Elizabeth teaching William to see beauty in the simplest details. The texture of an old wall, the reflection of light in a glass of water, the dancing shadows of a plant's leaves. During a coffee break, sitting on a small vintage sofa in the corner of the studio, Elizabeth showed William a special project she was working on, a series of photographs depicting the lives of deaf people in different parts of the world. "I want to show that being deaf is not a limitation, just a different way of experiencing the world," she typed. "Each person I've photographed has a unique story of overcoming and achievement." William looked at the images with renewed attention, beginning to truly understand what Elizabeth was trying to communicate through her art. It wasn't just about the absence of sound, but about the richness of experiences that existed beyond hearing. "You've completely changed my perspective," he confessed through the tablet. When my mother mentioned the arranged marriage, all I could think about were the difficulties. Now I realize how much prejudice was in that thought. Elizabeth gently touched William's arm, her eyes conveying deep understanding. She typed, "We all have fears and prejudices. What's important is being willing to overcome them. You're here. You're learning. You're trying to understand my world. That means a lot to me." As the sun began to set, painting the studio with golden tones, Elizabeth had an idea. She positioned William near one of the large windows and began photographing him. He, usually shy in front of cameras, felt strangely at ease under her gaze. After taking a few photos, Elizabeth showed the results to William. The images were astonishing. She had managed to capture something in him that even he didn't recognize, a beautiful vulnerability, an openness to new possibilities. Before leaving, William gathered his courage and, using the signs he had practiced, in secret, invited Elizabeth for an outing the next day. Her radiant smile was all the answer he needed. Driving back home, William realized that something had fundamentally shifted within him. The initial fear was giving way to genuine curiosity, a desire to learn more about Elizabeth and her silent yet incredibly expressive world. Sunday dawned with a stunningly blue sky, as if nature itself wanted to collaborate with William and Elizabeth's meeting. He had carefully planned every detail of the outing, eager to show her that he was truly committed to building a connection. William parked in front of the building where Elizabeth was staying, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. When she appeared, wearing a light floral dress and carrying her inseparable camera bag, he couldn't help but smile. "Good morning," William signed, proud to remember the correct gesture. Elizabeth responded with a radiant smile and the same sign. The first destination of the day was a surprise. William drove for about half an hour until they reached a small airfield on the outskirts of the city. Elizabeth's eyes widened with a mix of curiosity and excitement when she saw the small twin-engine plane waiting for them. William grabbed his tablet to explain, "I thought I'd show you our city from a different perspective. Sometimes we need to step back to see the beauty of the whole." Elizabeth's face lit up at the idea. She nodded enthusiastically and typed, "Carson, this is amazing. I've never seen the city from above. It'll be perfect for photos." After a brief safety explanation from the pilot, who used clear gestures so Elizabeth could understand everything, they boarded. The takeoff was smooth, and soon they were flying over the city. William watched, fascinated, as Elizabeth alternated between frantically taking photos and simply absorbing the view with wide-eyed wonder. At one point, she lowered the camera and simply held William's hand, squeezing it gently in a silent gesture of gratitude. The unexpected touch sent a wave of warmth through his body, a connection that went beyond words. After the flight, William took Elizabeth to a small cafe in the historic center of the city. The place was known for its cozy atmosphere and the quality of its artisanal treats. Sitting at a table on the patio, overlooking a tree-lined square, they began a conversation through a mix of basic signs, intuitive gestures, and typed messages. "The flight was incredible," Elizabeth typed, her eyes still sparkling from the experience. "Thank you for showing me the city in such a special way." William smiled, happy that he had made the right choice. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. I wanted to give you a unique perspective, just like you do with your photographs." The conversation flowed surprisingly well despite the language barriers. They discussed art, architecture, their life experiences, and dreams for the future. William was impressed by the depth of Elizabeth's thoughts and her unique way of seeing the world. At a particularly touching moment, Elizabeth shared, "You know, many people think my life is silent, but in reality, it's full of sounds. The world vibrates in ways most people don't notice. I can feel music through vibrations. I can hear the wind by how it moves the trees. I can understand emotions through body language. It's a rich world full of nuances." William fell silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. He then typed, "You're teaching me to listen in a completely new way. Thank you for sharing your world with me." After coffee, they walked through the square, occasionally stopping for Elizabeth to take some photos. William watched intently as she moved, how her eyes captured details he would normally overlook. It was as if she were constantly composing a visual symphony of the world around her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange, William had an idea. He gently took Elizabeth's hand and guided her to an old bandstand in the center of the square. There, to her surprise, he began to dance slowly, leading her in a gentle rhythm. Elizabeth looked at him, confused at first, but soon understood. Even without hearing the music, she could feel the vibration of their steps on the wooden floor of the bandstand. She could read the rhythm in William's body. Gradually, they found perfect synchrony, dancing to a song only the two of them could hear. In that moment, wrapped in that silent yet deeply connected dance, something shifted between them. They were no longer two strangers brought together by a family arrangement, but two people discovering a unique and special way to communicate. When they finally stopped, still embraced, Elizabeth looked into William's eyes with an intensity that left him breathless. She brought her hand to her heart and then pointed to him, a simple gesture but one filled with meaning. Back at Elizabeth's apartment, they said goodbye with a lingering hug. Before leaving, William signaled with the movements he had secretly practiced. "Thank you for a wonderful day." Elizabeth's smile was the most eloquent response he could have received. That night, lying in bed, William reflected on how his life had changed in such a short time. What had started as an imposed obligation was turning into something beautiful and unexpected. For the first time, he allowed himself to think that, perhaps, just perhaps, this arranged marriage could become a true love story. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries for William and Elizabeth. As the wedding day approached, they found themselves meeting more and more frequently, torn between the formal preparations demanded by their families and the precious moments they reserved for themselves. William dove headfirst into learning sign language, surprising everyone with his dedication. His lessons with Paul, the teacher hired by his mother, had transformed from an obligation into one of the most anticipated moments of his week. He practiced, constantly, eager to communicate better and better with Elizabeth. On a sunny afternoon, as they walked through a city park, William decided to put everything he had learned into practice. With movement still a bit hesitant but full of meaning, he began to converse with Elizabeth using only signs. "You transformed my life," he signed slowly, concentrating on each movement. "Before, I saw the world one way. Now, I see everything differently." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. She responded with quick, fluid signs, which William mostly understood. "You transformed mine too. I never imagined someone would try so hard to enter my world." In that moment, something clicked between them. The communication barrier, which at first seemed insurmountable, was being broken down day by day, sign by sign. However, not everything was smooth sailing. As their relationship deepened, challenges also arose. One of them came in the form of a family gathering at William's parents' house. It was a Sunday lunch, and the entire extended family was there: uncles, cousins, grandparents. Elizabeth was visibly nervous. It was the first time she would meet everyone together. William did his best to make her comfortable, staying by her side and helping with communication. In the middle of lunch, Aunt Martha, known for her sharp tongue, made a comment that left everyone tense. "But what will happen when you have children? Wouldn't it be better to adopt to avoid the child being born?" You know, the silence that followed was deafening. William felt Elizabeth's body stiffen beside him. Before he could think, he stood up, his hands moving with an intensity that surprised everyone. "Deafness is not a disease," he signed and spoke simultaneously so everyone could understand. "It's a trait, like eye or hair color. Elizabeth is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met, and any child would be blessed to have her as a mother." Elizabeth looked at William with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She then stood up and, with a dignity that impressed everyone, began to sign. William translated for the family. "I understand the fear of the unknown. I myself have been afraid of not being accepted, of not being understood. But I've learned that the greatest barriers aren't physical, they're the ones we build. In our minds, I'm here, open and willing to build bridges with all of you. I hope you'll give me that chance." Elizabeth's speech deeply moved the family. Gradually, the tense atmosphere dissipated, and relatives began to ask genuine questions about her life, her work, and her experiences. William watched with pride as Elizabeth won everyone over with her intelligence and charisma. Later that night, back at home, William received a message from Elizabeth. "Thank you for today, for standing up for me, for being by my side. You make me feel strong." William replied, "We're a team now. We will face everything together." The days that followed brought new challenges and lessons. William began to accompany Elizabeth to some of her professional commitments, seeing up close how she navigated the world of photography and the arts. He was impressed by her ability to communicate through images, transcending the barriers of language. At a vernissage for one of Elizabeth's exhibitions, William had the opportunity to see her work appreciated by critics and art lovers. He watched in fascination as she used a mix of sign language, writing, and body expressions to explain the concept behind her photographs. That night, as they walked hand in hand through the nearly empty gallery, William realized he was hopelessly in love. It wasn't just Elizabeth's physical beauty that attracted him, but her inner strength, her creativity, her unique way of seeing and interpreting the world. Stopping in front of a particularly touching photograph, a close-up of an elderly violinist's hands, William turned to Elizabeth and signed, "You taught me to listen with my eyes and speak with my hands. You opened a new world for me, a world full of beauty and possibilities I never imagined. I love you, Elizabeth, not because I have to, but because my heart chose to love you." Elizabeth looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. Slowly, she brought her hand to her heart and then extended it toward William, the universal gesture for "I love you." There, surrounded by images capturing moments of deep human connection, they sealed their love with a tender kiss. It was the beginning of a journey that promised to be challenging, but incredibly rewarding. The marriage that had started as an arrangement between families had transformed into a union of souls, a partnership based on mutual respect, understanding, and a love that transcended words, spoken or signed. As the big day approached, William and Elizabeth found themselves immersed in wedding preparations. What once seemed like an obligation imposed by their families had now become an event they both genuinely looked forward to. One Saturday morning, the couple met with Eleanor and Marina, their respective mothers, to discuss the ceremony details. The chosen venue was a beautiful botanical garden on the outskirts of the city, known for its lush vegetation and historic architecture. "We thought about adapting some traditional elements to make the ceremony more inclusive," explained Eleanor, showing a tablet with the plans. "There will be sign language interpreters strategically placed, and the music will be accompanied by synchronized lights so that Elizabeth and other deaf guests can feel the rhythm." Elizabeth smiled, moved by the consideration. She then typed on the tablet, "I'd like to suggest something. What if, in addition to spoken vows, William and I made our vows in sign language? It would be a beautiful way to unite our worlds." William nodded enthusiastically. "I love the idea. I can practice my vows in sign language, and that way everyone can understand, whether through speech or signs." The mothers exchanged approving glances, visibly moved by the couple's connection. Marina, who had initially been apprehensive about the arranged marriage, now clearly saw the genuine love blossoming between her daughter and William. In the days that followed, between dress fittings and menu tastings, William and Elizabeth set aside moments for themselves, deepening their connection and planning their future. On a quiet afternoon, sitting on the terrace of William's apartment, they discussed their post-wedding plans. "I've been thinking," signed William, his movements becoming more fluid, "that we could combine our passions into a joint project. How about creating a studio that combines architecture and photography?" Elizabeth's eyes lit up at the idea. She quickly grabbed her tablet to elaborate. "That would be amazing. We could create spaces that are not only functional and beautiful, but also tell stories through images. Imagine photographic exhibitions integrated into the architecture itself." Excited, they spent hours discussing possibilities, sketching ideas, and dreaming about the future they would build together. It was clear that their partnership went far beyond romance. There was a professional and creative synergy that promised extraordinary results. As the big day approached, William decided to prepare a special surprise for Elizabeth. He had noticed that despite her confidence and independence, she sometimes felt isolated in social situations where most people didn't know sign language. With the help of Paul, his sign language teacher, William organized a series of workshops for their closest family and friends. The idea was to teach basic signs and communication etiquette with deaf individuals, so Elizabeth would feel truly included in the new family she was about to join. On the night before the wedding, during the rehearsal, William revealed the surprise. One by one, family and friends approached Elizabeth, greeting her in sign language and expressing their wishes for happiness with simple yet heartfelt gestures. Elizabeth, completely moved, looked at William with teary eyes. "You did this for me?" she signed, her expression a mix of surprise and gratitude. William nodded, smiling. "I want you to feel at home with my family, just as you make me feel like part of your world." At that moment, in front of everyone, Elizabeth pulled William into a passionate kiss, breaking the rehearsal protocol but drawing applause and emotional smiles from the guests. Later, alone in the garden of the ceremony venue, William and Elizabeth exchanged intimate promises, beyond the official vows they would make the next day. "I promise to always find new ways to communicate with you," William signed. "I promise to be your ears when you need, and to learn to see the world through your eyes." Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, responded, "And I promise to be your voice when the silence is too heavy. I promise to show you the beauty that exists beyond words and sounds." They stood there, under the starry sky, their hands intertwined, speaking more than any words could express. The marriage that had started as an obligation had transformed into the most beautiful love story either of them could have imagined. The next morning, as the sun rose, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, William woke up with a sense of peace and certainty he had never felt before. Today was not just the day he would fulfill a family agreement. It was the day he would officially begin his journey alongside the woman who had captured his heart in ways he never thought possible. The future that awaited them was full of promises, challenges, and above all, a love that transcended all barriers. The dawn of the wedding day brought with it a palpable energy of anticipation and emotion. The botanical garden, chosen as the setting for the ceremony, was magnificently decorated with white flowers and touches of green, creating an ethereal and romantic atmosphere. William woke up early, a mix of nervousness and joy bubbling in his chest. As he got ready, he mentally rehearsed the sign language vows he had tirelessly practiced over the past weeks. Every movement, every facial expression carried a deep meaning he wanted to convey perfectly to Elizabeth. Across town, Elizabeth was also getting ready, surrounded by her closest friends and her mother, Marina. The dress, an elegant design, combining delicate lace and pure silk, had been carefully chosen not only for its beauty, but also for allowing her arms to move freely to communicate in ASL. As the makeup artist applied the final touches, Marina approached her daughter, her eyes shining with emotion. Using the signs she had recently learned, she expressed, "My dear, I've always dreamed of this day, but I never imagined it would be so special. You found not just a husband, but a true partner." Elizabeth, moved, hugged her mother tightly. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy, but the unconditional support of her family had been crucial. In the garden, the guests began to arrive. As William had planned, ASL interpreters were strategically positioned, ensuring that every moment of the ceremony was accessible to deaf guests. Soft lights pulsed to the rhythm of the ambient music, creating a unique synesthetic experience. When the moment arrived, William took his place at the makeshift altar, a floral arch of white and green flowers perfectly framing the scene. His heart raced as he saw Elizabeth appear at the garden entrance, radiant in her white dress, a bouquet of orchids in her hands. As Elizabeth walked down the aisle, accompanied by her father, William noticed something that deeply moved him. Several guests were making the ASL sign for applause, a silent wave of celebration that spread through the audience. When they finally stood face to face, William and Elizabeth exchanged a look filled with love and understanding. The officiant, trained for the occasion, began the ceremony both orally and in ASL, creating a truly inclusive atmosphere. Then came the moment for the vows. William took a deep breath and with fluid movements and eloquent facial expressions, began to sign. Elizabeth, before I met you, I lived in a world limited by sounds. You taught me to listen with my heart and to see the beauty in silence. I promise to be not only your husband, but your partner in every sense. Together, we will create our own symphony of love, one that transcends words and sounds. Tears of emotion streamed down Elizabeth's face as she absorbed every signed word. When it was her turn, she responded with the grace and elegance that always defined her. William, you entered my life as an obligation and became my most precious choice. You not only learned my language, but opened your heart to my world. I promise to be your companion in every adventure, to interpret the world by your side, and to build a life full of love, understanding, and beauty. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The emotion was palpable, transcending any communication barrier. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, William and Elizabeth sealed their union with a passionate kiss as the guests erupted, in a mix of audible and visual applause. The reception that followed was a vibrant celebration of love and inclusion. The dance floor pulsed not only with music, but with rhythmic lights that allowed everyone, deaf and hearing, to feel the beat. In a touching moment, William and Elizabeth shared their first dance as a couple, moving in perfect sync, guided more by gaze and touch than by melody. During the party, several guests approached the couple, many making an effort to use the basic signs they had learned. Aunt Martha, who had previously made insensitive remarks, surprised everyone by approaching Elizabeth and, with hesitant but sincere gestures, apologizing and expressing her wishes for happiness. As the night progressed, William and Elizabeth found a moment of quiet. Stepping away from the bustle of the party, they stood near an illuminated fountain in the garden. "Are you happy?" William signed, his face lit by a genuine smile. Elizabeth nodded, her eyes shining with joy. She then took William's hands and placed them over her heart. The gesture spoke more than 1,000 words ever could. At that moment, watching the guests dancing, laughing, and communicating in ways that transcended speech, William felt a wave of gratitude. What had started as an arrangement had turned into the most beautiful journey of his life. As they shared another kiss under the stars, William and Elizabeth knew they were at the beginning of an extraordinary adventure, a life together, built on foundations of love, respect, and communication that went far beyond words. The first rays of morning sunlight danced on the waves of the Mediterranean Sea, creating a spectacle of light that William marveled at from the hotel balcony in Maui. He held a steaming cup of coffee, savoring the morning silence and reflecting on the extraordinary events that had brought him there. Elizabeth was still asleep in the room, exhausted after an intense day of exploring the Greek island. Their honeymoon, which had already lasted 2 weeks, had been a journey of discovery, not only of the world around them, but also of each other. William smiled as he remembered the moment he revealed the trip's destination to Elizabeth. He had planned every detail with her in mind, choosing locations known for their visual beauty, hiring guides who knew sign language, and even learning a few Greek signs to surprise her. A gentle movement behind him made him turn. Elizabeth was standing at the balcony door, her hair disheveled and a sleepy smile on her lips. William set the cup on the table and signed, "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" Elizabeth nodded, stepping closer for a hug. They stood there for a few moments, taking in the breathtaking view, communicating through touch and each other's presence. Finally, Elizabeth stepped back a little and signed, "I had an amazing dream last night. I dreamed about our future studio." William's eyes lit up with interest. Even before the wedding, they had been discussing the idea of combining their passions, his architecture and her photography, into an innovative project. "Tell me more," he replied in sign language, his curiosity evident. Elizabeth began to enthusiastically describe her vision, a space that seamlessly blended architecture and visual art, where structures told stories and images came to life in 3 dimensions. It was a bold concept, challenging the conventions of both architecture and photography. As she spoke, her hands moving gracefully in the air, William felt his heart race with excitement. This was what he loved most about Elizabeth, her ability to dream big, to see possibilities where others saw limitations. "It's perfect," he signed when she finished. "When we get back home, we'll start planning this seriously." The rest of the morning was spent with the two sketching ideas in a notebook, their creative minds working in perfect harmony. The studio project, which had once been just a vague idea, was beginning to take shape and substance. In the weeks following their return from the honeymoon, William and Elizabeth dove headfirst into realizing their shared dream. They rented a spacious location in an up-and-coming neighborhood of the city, an old industrial warehouse that offered endless possibilities for transformation. The process of renovating the space became a test of their relationship and their professional partnership. There were moments of disagreement, of course. William, with his background in architecture, sometimes got too caught up in the practical and structural aspects. Elizabeth, on the other hand, prioritized aesthetics and visual impact. One particularly tense afternoon, they found themselves at an impasse over the design of the main exhibition area. The discussion grew heated, with rapid signs and frustrated expressions from both sides. It was then that William, realizing they were losing perspective, did something unexpected. He took Elizabeth by the hand and led her out of the warehouse. They walked in silence for a few blocks until they reached a small park. There, sitting on a bench, away from the blueprints and decisions that were overwhelming them, they finally calmed down. "I'm sorry," William signed, his face showing regret. "Sometimes I forget that we're building this together, not against each other." Elizabeth smiled, the tension leaving her body. "I apologize too. We're a team, remember? We should use our differences to strengthen us, not divide us." That moment in the park marked a turning point in their approach. From then on, they established a routine of regular check-ins, moments to step away from work and reconnect as a couple. As the project progressed, William and Elizabeth discovered new facets of each other. William was impressed by Elizabeth's keen eye for details he would normally overlook. In turn, Elizabeth admired William's ability to turn abstract concepts into tangible structures. Finally, after months of hard work, the big day of the studio's inauguration arrived. The space they had created was truly unique, a perfect fusion of innovative architecture and immersive photography. The walls were not just supports for images, but integral parts of the visual narratives. Every corner of the studio told a story, inviting visitors into a multi-sensory experience. On the opening night, as guests marveled at the space, William and Elizabeth found themselves in the center of the main hall. Without words or signs, they simply embraced, their bodies conveying all the pride, love, and gratitude they felt. In that moment, surrounded by the physical manifestation of their love and creativity, they understood that they had built much more than a studio. They had created a home for their dreams, a testament that together they could overcome any challenge and turn the impossible into reality. When the last guest left and they were alone in the space they had created, William turned to Elizabeth and signed with a smile. "And to think this all started with an arranged marriage." Elizabeth laughed silently and replied, "Sometimes fate knows exactly what it's doing." Hand in hand, they walked through the studio one last time that night, their hearts full of love and their minds already dreaming of the next adventures the future held. The success of William and Elizabeth's studio exceeded all expectations. Within just a year, they became a respected name in both the architecture world and the art circuit. Their innovative exhibitions, blending immersive photography with carefully designed architectural spaces, attracted visitors from across the country and even abroad. One autumn morning, as they had coffee in their apartment's kitchen, Elizabeth surprised William with some exciting news. She slid an envelope across the table to him. William opened it, curious, and his eyes widened as he read the contents. It was an invitation to participate in a prestigious art biennial in Venice, Italy. The organizing committee had been impressed by the couple's innovative work and wanted them to create a special installation for the event. "This is incredible," William signed, a radiant smile on his face. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Elizabeth nodded, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I was thinking of creating something that truly challenges people's perceptions of communication and art. Something that allows both deaf and hearing individuals to experience art equally." In the weeks that followed, William and Elizabeth dove headfirst into the new project. They decided to create an installation called Echoes of Silence, which would explore the beauty and complexity of non-verbal communication. The installation would be a labyrinth of interconnected rooms, each representing a different aspect of the deaf experience. In one room, projections of hand signing would dance across the walls, inviting visitors to try to interpret their meaning. In another, subtle vibrations in the floor would transmit music that could be felt but not heard. The project was ambitious and challenging. William found himself struggling to translate some of Elizabeth's more abstract concepts into physical structures, while she sometimes grew frustrated with the technical limitations he pointed out. One day, during a particularly heated discussion about the design of one of the rooms, Elizabeth suddenly turned pale and staggered. William quickly caught her, his face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he signed after helping her sit down. Elizabeth nodded slowly, but William noticed she looked exhausted. In the following days, he observed that she often seemed nauseous in the mornings and tired more quickly than usual. Finally, after much insistence from William, Elizabeth agreed to see a doctor. The news they received changed everything. Elizabeth was pregnant. The revelation brought a wave of emotions for the couple: joy, excitement, but also apprehension. How would they balance the pregnancy with the biennial project? And what would it be like to raise a child in their unique world, where sound and silence intertwined in such complex ways? William, determined to support Elizabeth in every way, intensified his studies of sign language, focusing especially on vocabulary related to pregnancy and child rearing. He also began researching the development of both deaf and hearing babies, wanting to be prepared for any scenario. Elizabeth, for her part, channeled her emotions into the biennial project. The prospect of motherhood brought a new depth to her work. She began incorporating elements that explored themes of heritage, identity, and the bond between mother and child that transcends spoken language. As Elizabeth's belly grew, the Echoes of Silence project also took shape. The couple decided to add a new room to the installation, dedicated to the experience of a child being born into a world of sound and silence. This room became the emotional heart of the project, symbolizing hope, possibilities, and the unconditional love that needs no words to be expressed. Working together during the pregnancy brought William and Elizabeth even closer. William marveled at the changes in Elizabeth's body and was fascinated by the first movements of the baby. They spent hours discussing their dreams and fears about parenthood, their hands dancing in the air, weaving silent promises for their unborn child. When the time came to travel to Venice, Elizabeth was in her 7th month of pregnancy. Her doctor gave permission for the trip, but advised caution. The couple arrived in the city of Canals a week before the biennial opening, determined to finalize every detail of their installation. The setup was intense and exhausting, but also incredibly rewarding. Watching Echoes of Silence come to life was like witnessing the birth of another child. Each room pulsed with emotion and meaning, inviting visitors into a world where silence was as eloquent as any spoken word. On the opening night, William and Elizabeth stood at the entrance of their installation, hands intertwined, hearts racing. When the doors opened and the first visitors entered, the couple exchanged a look full of love and pride. The reactions exceeded their most optimistic expectations. Visitors left the installation visibly moved, many with tears in their eyes. Art critics praised the depth and innovation of the work. A deaf journalist declared that she had never felt so completely understood and represented in a piece of art. In the middle of the night, as they watched the awestruck crowd exploring their creation, Elizabeth suddenly squeezed William's hand. He looked at her, concerned, and saw that she was smiling, her hands on her belly. "The baby is kicking a lot," she signed. "I think he's enjoying the exhibition too." William placed his hand over Elizabeth's, feeling the movements of their son. In that moment, surrounded by the fruit of their labor and love, with their baby, making his presence known, they felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude and happiness. Echoes of Silence was not just an art installation, it was a testament to their journey, a monument to the love they had built, and a promise for the future they were about to embark on together as parents. As the night progressed in Venice, William and Elizabeth remained hand in hand, their hearts beating in unison, ready for the next chapter of their extraordinary love story. The baby's cry echoed through the room, waking William from a light sleep. He quickly got up, casting a loving glance at Elizabeth, who was still deep in slumber. The past few weeks had been exhausting for both of them, but especially for her. William walked over to the crib, where their 2-month-old daughter, Sophia, was stirring restlessly. Gently, he picked her up, feeling the warmth of her tiny body against his chest. Sophia immediately calmed down, recognizing the familiar touch of her father. "Hey, little one," William murmured, though he knew the words were more for himself than for the baby. He began to make the signs he had learned to communicate with her. "Daddy's here, everything's okay." As he cradled Sophia, William reflected on the tumultuous events that had preceded her birth. They had just returned from Venice, still elated by the success of Echoes of Silence, when Elizabeth went into labor nearly a month early. The hours at the hospital were intense and emotional. William used everything he had learned about medical sign language to ensure Elizabeth was always informed and comfortable. When Sophia finally entered the world, her cry broke the silence of the delivery room, bringing tears to both parents' eyes. Sophia's initial hearing tests were inconclusive, leaving William and Elizabeth in a limbo of uncertainty. They decided that regardless of the final outcome, they would raise Sophia in a bilingual environment where both spoken and sign language would be equally valued. Now, gazing at his daughter's sleeping face, William felt a mix of overwhelming love and responsibility. As an architect, he was used to planning and designing, but parenthood was a project no blueprint could fully prepare him for. A soft movement behind him made him turn. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, her face soft with sleep, but her eyes shining with love as she watched father and daughter together. "Is she okay?" Elizabeth signed, stepping closer. William nodded, gently passing Sophia into her mother's arms. He watched with admiration as Elizabeth immediately began making gentle signs to the baby, establishing an early visual and tactile connection. In the months that followed, William and Elizabeth adjusted to their new routine as parents, balancing the demands of motherhood with their artistic careers. The studio temporarily transformed into a more family-friendly space, with a special corner for Sophia filled with visual and tactile stimuli. It was during this time that they received an intriguing proposal, an invitation to create an interactive exhibition specifically designed for deaf and hearing children. The project, sponsored by a foundation supporting inclusive education, would be installed at a renowned children's museum. William and Elizabeth saw this as a unique opportunity to merge their art with their new experience as parents. They dove into the project with renewed enthusiasm, often working with Sophia by their side, drawing inspiration from their daughter's movements and reactions. The exhibition, which they named World of Senses, was a multi-sensory journey that invited children to explore different forms of communication and perception. One room was dedicated to musical vibrations that could be felt through the floor and walls. Another featured a garden of signs, where interactive plants responded to touch by teaching words in sign language. The creative process was not without challenges. There were nights when William and Elizabeth worked in shifts, one caring for Sophia, while the other focused on the designs. But each obstacle overcome brought them closer, strengthening both their relationship and their creative partnership. As the project took shape, they realized they were creating much more than an exhibition. They were building bridges between worlds, fostering understanding and empathy from the earliest age. The day of the opening arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. William and Elizabeth arrived early at the museum, with Sophia comfortably nestled in a sling. As they made final adjustments, they saw the first groups of children arriving, their faces lit with curiosity. The impact was immediate and powerful. Deaf and hearing children explored the spaces together, laughing, communicating through gestures and expressions. discovering new ways to interact with the world and each other. Emotional parents thanked the couple, many sharing stories of how the exhibition was opening new possibilities for communication in their families. In a particularly touching moment, William observed a deaf girl teaching a hearing child how to sign the word friend. The smiles on both children's faces, the pure joy of human connection, perfectly captured everything he and Elizabeth had hoped to achieve. That night, back in the comfort of their home, William and Elizabeth reflected on their journey. From an arranged marriage to a partnership of love and creativity, from uncertainties about communication to pioneers in inclusive art, they had come a long way. Sitting on the couch, with Sophia peacefully sleeping between them, they exchanged a look full of love and gratitude. Without words or signs, they communicated everything they felt, pride in what they had accomplished, love for what they had built together, and hope for the future unfolding before them. William gently touched Elizabeth's face, tracing the curve of her smile with his thumb. She held his hand, bringing it to her lips for a soft kiss. In that moment of quiet, with their daughter breathing softly between them, they felt they had found their own perfect symphony, a melody of love, creativity, and purpose that transcended all boundaries of sound and silence. The years passed quickly, bringing with them a series of changes and challenges for William and Elizabeth. Sophia, now 5 years old, was growing into a lively and curious child, fluent in both sign language and spoken language. Tests had finally confirmed that she had normal hearing, but her connection to her mother's silent world was deep and beautiful. On a sunny spring morning, the family was gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. Sophia, with her dark curls framing her face, alternated between speaking and signing, excitedly telling them about a school project. "Mom, Dad, the teacher asked us to do a presentation about our families," she exclaimed, her small hands forming signs with surprising precision. William and Elizabeth exchanged proud glances. Their daughter had become a true bridge between the worlds of sound and silence, navigating between them with a naturalness that inspired everyone around her. As Sophia continued her enthusiastic account, William's phone buzzed with a notification. He picked it up curious, and his eyes widened as he read the message. "Elizabeth," he signed, catching his wife's attention. "Remember that international inclusive design competition we entered our project in? We just won first place." The news was met with an explosion of joy. The project in question was an ambitious proposal for a fully accessible cultural center, incorporating universal design elements to cater to people with different needs, including the deaf, blind, and wheelchair users. In the days that followed, William and Elizabeth found themselves immersed in a wave of activities. The award was not only an honor, but also included substantial funding to bring the project to life. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for to expand their work on a much larger scale. However, the initial excitement soon gave way to a dilemma. The chosen location for the cultural center was in another city, several hours away. Taking on the project would mean a significant move for the family. Discussions stretched on for weeks. William and Elizabeth carefully weighed the pros and cons, always mindful of the impact their decision would have on Sophia. "It's an incredible opportunity," Elizabeth signed during one of their long nighttime conversations after Sophia had gone to sleep. "We could make a real difference in so many people's lives." William nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, but what about Sophia? Her school, her friends, the entire support network we've built here." The decision wasn't easy, but they finally reached an agreement. They would accept the project, but on the condition that they could split their time between the two cities. It would be a logistical challenge, but they were determined to make it work. The following months were a roller coaster of emotions and activities. Finding a new school for Sophia that was equally inclusive and welcoming was a top priority. Fortunately, they discovered a progressive institution that not only accepted, but celebrated linguistic and cultural diversity. The start of the cultural center's construction was a deeply emotional moment. William and Elizabeth had incorporated design elements that reflected their personal and professional journey. There were spaces that played with light and shadow, creating visual soundscapes. Textures and vibrations were used in innovative ways, to convey information and sensations. One day, during a visit to the construction site with Sophia, an incident occurred that deeply marked the family. The workers, unaware that Elizabeth was deaf, began shouting instructions at her. Before William could intervene, Sophia stepped forward. "My mum can't hear you," she said clearly, her voice small but firm. Then, to everyone's surprise, she began interpreting in sign language what the man was saying. The moment was transformative. Seeing Sophia, just 5 years old, take on the role of an interpreter with such naturalness and confidence filled William and Elizabeth with indescribable pride. More than that, it was a powerful reminder of the world they were helping to build. A world where communication barriers could be broken down with understanding and empathy. As the project progressed, William and Elizabeth found themselves facing new challenges. The distance and constant travel began to take their toll. There were moments of tension, nights of doubt, days when exhaustion threatened to outweigh their enthusiasm. But with every obstacle, they found strength in each other and in the greater purpose that guided them. Their hands, which had long learned to speak the language of love, were now literally building a more inclusive future. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, William found Elizabeth on the balcony of their temporary apartment, gazing thoughtfully at the city lights. He approached quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he signed when she turned to face him. Elizabeth smiled, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. "I'm thinking about how we got here," she replied. "From an arranged marriage to this, sometimes it feels like a dream." William nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. Together, they had turned an obligation into a partnership of love, creativity, and purpose. Every challenge overcome, every barrier broken, had made them stronger, individually and as a couple. As they looked out over the city below, William and Elizabeth knew they were in the midst of another exciting chapter of their journey. The cultural center they were building was more than just a building. It was a symbol of their hopes and dreams, a legacy they would leave for Sophia and future generations. With their hands intertwined, they stood there in silence, but their hearts spoke volumes. The future, with all its challenges and possibilities, stretched out before them like a blank canvas, ready to be filled with the vibrant colors of their shared love and creativity. The rising sun cast a golden glow on the facade of the newly inaugurated Inclusive Cultural Center. William and Elizabeth stood at the main entrance, hands clasped, watching with a mix of pride and anticipation as the first visitors began to arrive. Sophia, now 7 years old, ran excitedly back and forth, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Look, Dad, look, Mom!" she exclaimed, and signed simultaneously, pointing to the various groups approaching: families with children in wheelchairs, elderly people, young deaf individuals conversing in sign language, and many others. The cultural center was far more than William and Elizabeth had initially imagined. Beyond the accessible art galleries and adapted performance spaces, the venue housed an inclusive library, assistive technology workshops, and even a cafe managed by people with various types of disabilities. As they walked through the building, greeting visitors and staff, William and Elizabeth reflected on the journey that had brought them there. Every detail of the center carried a piece of their story, from the floor that subtly vibrated with music, allowing deaf individuals to feel the rhythm, to the textured walls that told stories through touch, inspired by Elizabeth's early experiences with tactile photography. The morning of the inauguration was a whirlwind of emotions and activities. William and Elizabeth were called for interviews, led special tours, and participated in an emotional ribbon-cutting ceremony, where Sophia had the honor of making the final cut, symbolizing the new generation for whom the center had been built. At the end of the day, exhausted but radiant, the family gathered in a quiet corner of the center's sensory garden. Sophia played happily on an adapted swing, while William and Elizabeth watched, their hands moving in silent conversation. "We did it," Elizabeth signed, her eyes shining with emotion. "Sometimes I still can't believe it." William nodded, a gentle smile on his lips. "It's more than we dreamed. It's a new beginning for so many people." In the months that followed, the center's impact on the community exceeded even their most optimistic expectations. It became a hub of innovation and inclusion, attracting visitors and scholars from across the country and even abroad. One day, as William worked in his office at the center, he received an unexpected visit. It was Charles, a young deaf architect, who had been inspired by William and Elizabeth's work. "Your project changed my life," Charles signed enthusiastically. "I always wanted to be an architect, but I thought my deafness would be an insurmountable obstacle. Seeing what you created here gave me hope and determination." Moved, William invited Charles to an internship at the center, thus initiating a mentorship program that would soon expand, offering opportunities to young people with diverse abilities and experiences. Meanwhile, Elizabeth found new ways to expand her artistic work. Inspired by the interactions she observed at the center, she began a photographic series called Languages of the Heart, capturing moments of connection between people who, at first glance, seemed to have nothing in common. One of her photographs showing a blind child reading the smiling face of a deaf elderly woman gained international recognition, being exhibited in galleries around the world. The image had become a powerful symbol of empathy and mutual understanding. Sophia, growing up in this environment of creativity and inclusion, flourished in surprising ways. Her natural ability to navigate between the world of sound and silence made her a born mediator. At school, she often helped integrate deaf and hearing classmates by organizing bilingual study groups. One day during dinner, Sophia surprised her parents with an announcement: "I want to start a club at school, a place where deaf and hearing kids can meet, play, and learn together." William and Elizabeth exchanged proud glances. Their daughter had not only inherited their creativity, but also their desire to build bridges between different worlds. With the enthusiastic support of her parents and the school, Sophia's Senses Club quickly became a sensation. Children of all ages gathered weekly for games, art, and activities that celebrated sensory diversity. The success was such that other schools in the region began implementing similar programs. As the Inclusive Cultural Center grew in reputation and impact, William and Elizabeth found themselves facing a new challenge: balancing professional success with family life. The demands for their presence at conferences, consultations, and international projects were constantly increasing. It was Sophia who once again offered a surprisingly mature solution. "Why don't we turn our travels into family adventures?" she suggested one day. "We can learn about inclusion in different cultures and bring those ideas back to the center." Sophia's suggestion proved brilliant. In the following years, the family embarked on a series of inclusion expeditions around the world. They visited schools for the deaf in Japan, explored assistive technologies in Scandinavia, and studied accessible architecture in ancient European cities. Each trip not only enriched William and Elizabeth's work, but also strengthened family bonds. Sophia, exposed to so many different cultures and forms of communication, developed an understanding of the world that went far beyond her years. On a starry night, sitting on the beach after a day of exploration on a small Greek island, William and Elizabeth reflected on their journey. Sophia slept peacefully between them, exhausted after a day of adventures. "Looking back," Elizabeth sighed softly, "would you have imagined that arranged marriage would bring us here?" William smiled, shaking his head. "Never, but I am infinitely grateful for every step of the way." They sat there, hands intertwined, hearts full of love and gratitude. What had started as an obligation had transformed into a life of purpose, creativity, and positive impact on the world. As the waves gently broke on the shore, William and Elizabeth knew their journey was far from over. Each new day brought possibilities to create more echoes of change, ripples of hope and inclusion that spread far beyond their individual lives, touching hearts and minds around the world. The years passed, bringing with them subtle and profound changes for William and Elizabeth's family. Sophia, now 16, had blossomed into a vibrant and determined young woman, carrying her parents' legacy, but also forging her own unique path in the world. It was a fall morning when Sophia walked into the kitchen, her eyes shining with a mix of nervousness and excitement. William and Elizabeth were having coffee, discussing plans for a new wing of the Inclusive Cultural Center dedicated to advanced assistive technologies. "Mom, Dad," Sophia called, alternating between speech and signs as she always did naturally. "I need to talk to you about something important." William and Elizabeth exchanged curious glances before giving their full attention to their daughter. Sophia took a deep breath before continuing. I've decided what I want to do after high school," she announced. "I want to study neuroscience and linguistics." The revelation took William and Elizabeth by surprise. Although they had always encouraged Sophia to pursue her own interests, they secretly hoped she might follow in their footsteps in the arts or architecture. "Neuroscience and linguistics," William signed, his eyebrows raised in question. Sophia nodded, her confidence growing as she explained, "I want to study how the brain processes language, especially in deaf and bilingual people like me. I think I can use that knowledge to develop new ways of communication and learning." Elizabeth smiled, her eyes filling with tears of pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart, but why did you seem so nervous to tell us?" Sophia hesitated for a moment. I know how much you love the Inclusive Cultural Center and all the work you do. Part of me felt like I should follow in your footsteps, continue what you started." William stood up and hugged his daughter tenderly. When he pulled away, he signed with conviction. "Sophia, the greatest gift you can give us is to follow your own passion. What you want to do is an incredible extension of our work, not a divergence from it." Elizabeth agreed, adding, "You grew up building bridges between different worlds. Now you want to do that in a way that's entirely your own. We couldn't be prouder." The relief and joy on Sophia's face were palpable. In the months that followed, the house was filled with biology and linguistics books as Sophia prepared for admission exams to the most prestigious universities in the country. William and Elizabeth watched with a mix of pride and nostalgia as their daughter embarked on this new phase of life. They realized that just as their love had transformed an arranged marriage into an extraordinary partnership, their example had inspired Sophia to dream big and seek to make a difference in the world in her own way. The day the acceptance letter arrived was a moment of great celebration. Sophia had been admitted to an innovative research program combining neuroscience, linguistics, and assistive technology. The university, recognizing Sophia's unique potential, offered her not only a full scholarship, but also the opportunity to work in a cutting-edge lab focused on brain-computer interfaces for people with communication disabilities. On the night, before Sophia left for university, the family gathered on the terrace of the Inclusive Cultural Center. The place that had been the epicenter of so many changes in their lives now served as the stage for yet another pivotal moment. As they watched the sunset, William couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them there. He turned to Elizabeth, his hands moving in a familiar dance. "Do you remember the first time we met? I was so scared, so full of doubts." Elizabeth smiled, completing the thought. "And look at us now. Look at what we've built together. Look at the incredible young woman we've raised." Sophia, watching the silent exchange between her parents, felt a wave of emotion. She joined the conversation, her signs fluid and expressive. "You both taught me that love can overcome any barrier, that communication goes far beyond spoken words. I'll carry these lessons with me forever." Tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. William embraced his wife and daughter, marveling at how far they had come and moved by the possibilities the future held. That night, as Sophia slept, dreaming of the challenges and discoveries that awaited her, William and Elizabeth stayed awake, reminiscing about the moments that had defined their journey. From their first awkward dinner to the triumphant opening of the Inclusive Cultural Center, every step had been an affirmation of their love and mutual commitment. Now, they saw their legacy blossoming in ways they could never have foreseen. Sophia wasn't just following in their footsteps, she was expanding the path, opening new frontiers of understanding and human connection. When they finally went to sleep, William and Elizabeth did so with hearts full of hope and gratitude. The future was uncertain, as it always had been, but they were confident that the love, creativity, and desire to make a difference they had cultivated in their family would continue to echo through generations, touching lives and transforming the world in ways still unimaginable. And so as one chapter of their lives gently closed, another opened, full of promise and possibilities. The love story that had begun with an unlikely arrangement continued to unfold, its effects rippling out like waves in a pond, touching lives far beyond what William and Elizabeth could have ever dreamed. 5 years had passed since Sophia left for university. The Inclusive Cultural Center, now an internationally recognized institution, pulsed with life and innovation. William and Elizabeth, though still deeply involved in their work, were beginning to think about passing the torch to the next generation of visionaries. It was a sunny spring afternoon when the couple received an email that made their hearts leap. Sophia was coming home, not just for a visit, but with a purpose that promised to unite her parents' legacy with her own academic journey in an exciting way. Days later, the family gathered in William's office at the center. Sophia, now a 21-year-old young woman, radiated confidence and enthusiasm. Her eyes sparkled with the same passion her parents recognized in themselves. "I have a proposal for you," Sophia began, alternating between speech and signs with the fluency of someone truly bilingual. "My research team has developed a revolutionary prototype. It's a neural interface that can translate thoughts into visual sign language and even synthesized speech." William and Elizabeth exchanged looks of astonishment and pride. Sophia continued, her excitement palpable. "We want to conduct the final tests and launch it here at the center. I can't think of a better place to introduce the world to a technology that can break down the last barriers of communication between the deaf and hearing communities." Sophia's proposal wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was the culmination of everything William and Elizabeth had worked for throughout their lives. It was the final bridge between the worlds of sound and silence. In the months that followed, the Inclusive Cultural Center transformed into a hub of frenetic activity. Scientists, engineers, linguists, and members of the deaf community from around the world converged to participate in what promised to be a historic moment. William, applying his architectural skills, worked on creating a special space to house Sophia's new laboratory. Elizabeth, in turn, documented the entire process through a powerful photo series, capturing the hopeful faces and expressive hands of the people whose lives would be transformed by this technology. The night of the project's unveiling arrived, filling the main auditorium of the center with anticipation. Sophia took the stage, flanked by her parents, a powerful image of 3 generations united by a common purpose. 25 years ago, Sophia began, her voice clear and her hands moving gracefully. 2 strangers met at an arranged dinner, an architect who only knew the world of sounds and a photographer who saw beauty in silence. Today we are here to present the fruit of not just my research, but of my parents' love and dedication to building bridges between worlds. As Sophia demonstrated the technology, inviting volunteers from the audience to test it, William and Elizabeth watched with tear-filled eyes. They saw not only their daughter's success, but the fulfillment of a dream they didn't even know they had when they met so many years ago. The impact was immediate and profound. Deaf individuals could, for the first time, express their thoughts aloud without the need for an interpreter. Hearing individuals could communicate in fluent sign language without years of practice. Barriers were falling before their eyes. In the days following the launch, the center was flooded with stories of transformed lives. Families reconnected, job opportunities opened up, and a new level of understanding and empathy spread through society. One afternoon, as William and Elizabeth walked hand in hand through the sensory garden of the center, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them there, they were surprised by Sophia. "Mom, Dad," she signed, her face radiant. "I just got a call. We've won the Nobel Prize, all 3 of us together. You for your pioneering work in inclusive design, and me for the neural technology. They said our family story is a testament to the transformative power of love and dedication." The initial shock gave way to an overwhelming wave of emotion. The 3 embraced, tears of joy flowing freely. In that moment, they were not just a family celebrating an achievement, they were a living symbol of how love can transcend all barriers, build bridges between worlds, and inspire changes that echo through generations. Later that night, William and Elizabeth sat on their porch, gazing at the stars. Their hands moved in a silent dance, reminiscing about their journey. "Who would have thought," William sighed, a gentle smile on his lips, "that arranged dinner would bring us here?" Elizabeth smiled back, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Our love built more than a home or a cultural center. It built a better future for so many people." As the night deepened, William and Elizabeth remained there, hands intertwined, hearts beating in unison. Their love, which had begun as an obligation, had transformed into a force capable of changing the world. And now, through Sophia and the countless lives they had touched, they knew their legacy would continue to flourish, building bridges and breaking down barriers for many generations to come. The story of William and Elizabeth, a symphony of love that transcended silence and sound, reached a new movement. Not an ending, but a glorious crescendo, promising a future where communication, in all its beautiful and diverse forms, would unite humanity like never before. 20 years had passed since that memorable night when William, Elizabeth, and Sophia received the news of the Nobel Prize. The world had changed drastically, and the technology Sophia had developed had become an integral part of global society. The Inclusive Cultural Center, now under the direction of a new generation of visionaries, continued to be a beacon of innovation and inclusion. William, at 72, and Elizabeth, at 70, had officially retired from their administrative roles at the center, but remained active as mentors and consultants. Their hair, now completely gray, framed faces marked by time, yet still glowing with the same passion and love that had united them decades ago. It was a fall morning when they received a special invitation. The Inclusive Cultural Center would celebrate its 30th anniversary with a global event broadcast to millions of people around the world. The theme was Bridges of Time Connecting, Past, Present, and Future. Sophia, now a renowned 41-year-old scientist, was leading an ambitious project that promised to take inclusive communication to new heights. She had expanded her research to include not only the translation of thoughts into sign language and speech, but also emotions and tactile sensations. The goal was to create a truly immersive experience of empathy and mutual understanding. As they prepared for the event, William and Elizabeth reflected on the incredible journey they had undertaken. The marriage that had begun as an arrangement had transformed into a partnership that changed the world. Their hands, now a bit more wrinkled, still moved with grace and expressiveness as they conversed in sign language. "Did you imagine on that first night that we would come this far?" William signed, a nostalgic smile on his lips. Elizabeth shook her head, her eyes shining with memories. "Never, but every step of this journey was worth it. Look at what we built together, the legacy we left." The day of the event arrived, bringing with it a wave of emotions. The main auditorium of the center was packed, with giant screens displaying smiling faces from all corners of the globe. Sophia's technology allowed everyone to communicate in real time, transcending linguistic and sensory barriers. William and Elizabeth walked onto the stage hand in hand, greeted by a silent yet thunderous ovation, hands waving in the air and applause echoing through the space. Sophia accompanied them, a living bridge between generations. 50 years ago, William began, his voice amplified and simultaneously translated into sign language and hundreds of other languages. "I was a nervous young architect, about to meet the woman my mother had chosen for me to marry. I knew nothing about Elizabeth's silent world and feared we would never truly connect." Elizabeth continued, her hands dancing in the air as the technology translated her signs into speech. "I had my doubts too. As a deaf photographer, I saw the world in a unique way. I feared William would never understand my perspective, that there would always be a barrier between us." Sophia then took the floor, seamlessly alternating between speech and signs. But their love proved stronger than any barrier. They not only learned to communicate with each other, but dedicated their lives to building bridges for others. The Inclusive Cultural Center was born from that love, and with it, a revolution in how we view communication and inclusion. The screens around the auditorium displayed images of the center's history, from William's early sketches to the latest technological innovations. Faces of people whose lives had been transformed appeared, telling their stories in a symphony of voices and signs. Today, Sophia continued, we stand on the brink of a new breakthrough. The technology we've developed doesn't just translate words and signs, but also emotions and sensations. Imagine a world where empathy isn't just a concept, but a tangible and shareable experience. As Sophia demonstrated the new technology, inviting volunteers from the audience and live streams to participate, William and Elizabeth watched with tears in their eyes. They saw not only their daughter's success, but the realization of a dream that transcended generations. The audience watched in awe as people from different countries, speaking different languages and with different abilities, connected on a deep, emotional level. Cultural and linguistic barriers dissolved before their eyes, replaced by a mutual understanding that seemed almost magical. At the end of the demonstration, William and Elizabeth were invited to experience the technology. When they connected, it was as if they relived every moment of their journey together. The nervousness of their first meeting, the joy of their wedding, Sophia's birth, the challenges and triumphs over the years. But now they could feel each other's emotions with a clarity they had never imagined possible. Tears streamed freely down both their faces, and there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. It was a living testament to the power of love to transcend all barriers. When the event came to an end, William, Elizabeth, and Sophia remained on stage holding hands, symbolizing the union of the past, present, and future. The image was broadcast to millions around the world, an icon of hope and possibility. That night, after the lights dimmed and the last guest departed, the family gathered in the sensory garden of the center. The place that had witnessed so many pivotal moments in their lives now seemed to vibrate with memories and promises of the future. William turned to Elizabeth, his hands moving in a familiar dance. 50 years together, my love. And every day has been a new discovery, a new adventure. Elizabeth smiled, her eyes shining with the same love that had captivated her so many years ago. And we still have so much to discover, so much to create together. Sophia watched her parents with admiration and gratitude. You didn't just change your own lives, she sighed. You changed the world, and you continue to inspire everyone around you to do the same. As the night deepened, the stars shining above them, William, Elizabeth, and Sophia remained in the garden, their minds filled with memories of the past and dreams for the future. The legacy they had built would continue to grow and flourish, touching lives and breaking down barriers for generations to come. The love story that began with an unlikely arrangement had transformed into a force capable of uniting humanity. And as the world around them continued to evolve and change, one thing remained constant: the power of love to build bridges, transcend barriers, and create a brighter, more inclusive future for all. The year was 2075, and the world had changed in ways William and Elizabeth could hardly have imagined when they met over half a century ago. The inclusive communication technology developed by Sophia had evolved beyond even the most optimistic expectations, becoming a cornerstone of global society. William, now 92, and Elizabeth, 90, had become almost legendary figures in the fields of inclusion and universal design. Though their bodies had aged, their spirits remained vibrant, fueled by the love they shared and the lasting impact of their work. The Inclusive Cultural Center, now with branches on every continent, was celebrating its 50th anniversary. To mark the occasion, a special exhibition titled Waves of Time was being unveiled, tracing the evolution of inclusive communication from the center's early days to the present. Sophia, at 61, was leading a global team of scientists and artists in creating a groundbreaking immersive experience for the exhibition. Using the latest augmented reality and neural interface technology, visitors could literally walk through history, experiencing key milestones in the development of inclusive communication as if they were there. On the morning of the opening, William and Elizabeth were gently assisted by their great-grandchildren, Luke and Aria, aged 10 and 8 respectively, as they prepared for the event. The children, born into a world where communication between the Deaf and hearing was perfectly fluid, could hardly imagine the barriers their great-grandparents had faced and overcome. "Great-grandpa," signed Luke, his eyes shining with curiosity, "what was the world like before we could feel each other's thoughts?" William smiled, his hands moving with the grace of decades of practice. "It was a world often divided, my dear. People who couldn't hear or speak often felt isolated. But it was also a world full of possibilities, waiting to be transformed by the power of love and understanding." Elizabeth added, her voice softly translated by the technology that was now an integral part of their lives. "That's why this exhibition is so important, to remind everyone of where we came from and to inspire future generations to keep building bridges." When they arrived at the center, they were greeted by an enthusiastic crowd. The building's facade had been transformed into a giant screen, displaying ever-changing images that told the story of the center and the countless lives it had touched over the years. Sophia found her parents at the entrance, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and pride. "Are you ready to relive some memories?" she asked, guiding them to the start of the exhibition. The first room instantly transported them to that fateful night over 50 years ago when William and Elizabeth first met. Augmented reality technology perfectly recreated the restaurant, the nervous expressions on the young William and Elizabeth's faces, the palpable tension in the air. The present-day William and Elizabeth found themselves immersed in the scene, reliving that crucial moment with striking clarity. They could feel the nervousness, the uncertainty, but also the spark of connection that, even then, had begun to ignite between them. As they moved through the exhibition, each room brought to life a different chapter of their journey. They saw themselves working together on their first projects, facing challenges, celebrating victories. They experienced again the excitement of Sophia's birth, the opening of the inclusive cultural center, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that followed. One particularly emotional room recreated the moment when Sophia first presented her revolutionary technology. William and Elizabeth could feel once more the awe and joy that had overwhelmed them that day, the realization that the dream of truly inclusive communication was becoming a reality. As they progressed, personal memories intertwined with the broader history of progress in communication and inclusion. They saw how their actions had inspired others, creating a ripple effect of positive change around the world. The final room of the exhibition, however, was the one that surprised them the most. Instead of looking back at the past, this room was dedicated to the future. Using advanced predictive technology, it offered glimpses of possible advancements. In the next 50 years, William and Elizabeth saw a world where empathy and mutual understanding were the norm, not the exception. Technologies that allowed communication not just between different languages and abilities, but also between species. They saw cities designed with inclusion at their core, where every individual, regardless of their abilities, could fully participate in society. As they left the exhibition, William and Elizabeth were emotionally drained but deeply inspired. Sophia met them at the exit, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "What did you think?" she asked, eager for their reactions. William and Elizabeth looked at each other, their hands automatically intertwining. It was Elizabeth who answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's incredible, my dear. To see our entire journey like this, it's almost hard to believe. But the most moving part is seeing the future we helped create. A future that will continue long after us." William nodded, adding, "We started this journey just wanting to understand each other. We never imagined it would lead to something so grand, so transformative." Sophia embraced her parents, feeling the weight of history and the promise of the future in that hug. "You planted the seeds of this future with your love. We will continue to nurture them and see what more can bloom." As they walked toward the grand hall where the official opening ceremony would take place, William and Elizabeth reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an arranged marriage had transformed into a force capable of changing the world. Looking at their great-grandchildren, who ran ahead of them, marveling at every new detail of the exhibition, they felt a wave of hope and gratitude. The legacy they had built would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives and breaking down barriers for generations to come. And as they prepared to share their story once more with the world, William and Elizabeth knew that their love, that unlikely connection born so many years ago, would continue to echo through time, inspiring others to build bridges, transcend barriers, and create a future where everyone could truly be heard and understood. The year was 2080, and the world was celebrating William's centennial. The Inclusive Cultural Center, now a global network of institutions dedicated to universal communication and understanding, had organized an unprecedented event to honor the man whose love story had sparked a revolution in how humanity connected. William, at 97, still had the sparkle in his eyes that had captivated Elizabeth so many decades ago. Elizabeth, at 95, remained by his side, her presence a constant source of strength and inspiration. Though their bodies had aged, the bond between them seemed stronger than ever, fueled by years of love, challenges overcome, and shared dreams. The event, titled Symphonies of Infinity, was not just a celebration of William's life, but an exploration of the future of human communication. Scientists, artists, and visionaries from around the world gathered to present the latest innovations in inclusive technology and to imagine the next leap in the evolution of human connection. Sophia, now 66, and a globally respected leader in neuroscience and communication, led the organization of the event. She had assembled a diverse team of brilliant minds, including her own children and grandchildren, each bringing a unique perspective to the future of global inclusion and empathy. The opening ceremony was a spectacle of light, sound, and sensation. Using the most advanced augmented reality and neural interface technology, participants were immersed in an experience that transcended traditional senses. It was as if they could feel the story of William and Elizabeth from their first nervous meeting to the present moment. William and Elizabeth, seated at the center of the main auditorium, were enveloped by waves of emotion emanating from the crowd. The technology allowed everyone to share not just thoughts and words, but deep feelings of gratitude, admiration, and hope. Sophia took the stage, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Welcome," she began, her voice and signs simultaneously translated into hundreds of languages and forms of communication. "We are here not only to celebrate the centennial of a remarkable man, my father, William. We are here to celebrate the transformative power of love, understanding, and human connection." She made a sweeping gesture, and the auditorium transformed into a vast field of stars. Each light you see represents a life touched by the pioneering work of William and Elizabeth. Each connection between these lights is a bridge built, a barrier broken. The stars began to pulse and move, forming intricate patterns that represented the evolution of inclusive communication over the decades. It was a cosmic dance of ideas and innovations, culminating in the present moment. "But we are not here just to look at the past," Sophia continued. "We are here to imagine and shape the future, a future where empathy knows no bounds, where understanding transcends all barriers." With another gesture, the starfield expanded, enveloping the entire room. The participants found themselves floating in space, each one a bright star connected to countless others. "Imagine a world," Sophia went on, her voice reverberating through the cosmic vastness, "where every thought, every emotion, every experience can be shared and perfectly understood. Where differences do not divide us, but enrich us. Where love, like the love my parents share, can truly change the course of history." The stars began to move again, this time forming images of the future. Cities where architecture instantly adapted to the needs of each individual. Schools where knowledge was shared through direct experiences. Hospitals where empathy was as important as medicine in healing. William and Elizabeth watched in awe, their hands intertwined, hearts beating in unison. They saw not only the fruit of their work and love, but a future that surpassed even their most ambitious dreams. Sophia then invited William and Elizabeth to the stage. Helped by their great-grandchildren, the couple stood up, greeted by a wave of love and respect that seemed to make the very air vibrate. William, his voice amplified by technology, but still carrying the warmth and emotion it always had, addressed the audience. "When I met Elizabeth, over 70 years ago, I feared we would never truly be able to communicate. Today, I stand before You, a living witness to the power of love to overcome any barrier. Elizabeth, her eyes shining with tears of joy, added, "Every challenge we faced, every obstacle we overcame, brought us here. But our journey, humanity's journey toward true connection, is far from over." Sophia then revealed the final surprise of the event, a revolutionary project that promised to take inclusive communication beyond the limits of Earth. "Inspired by the love and dedication of my parents," she announced, "we are launching the Stellar Bridges Initiative. Our goal is to develop technologies that will allow us to communicate and connect, not only across different cultures and abilities here on Earth, but potentially with other life forms in the universe." The revelation was met with astonishment and excitement. The idea that the work begun by William and Elizabeth could one day facilitate communication with extraterrestrial beings seemed the perfect culmination of their extraordinary journey. As the ceremony came to an end, William and Elizabeth remained on stage, surrounded by their family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the palpable energy of thousands of inspired minds. They looked at each other, their eyes saying more than words or signs ever could. In that moment, they felt connected not only to each other, not only to their family and those present, but to the entire flow of human history, past, present, and future. The love that had begun as an uncertain spark at an arranged dinner now illuminated the path to the stars. And so, as the world celebrated their centennial, William knew that their story, the love story he and Elizabeth had written together, would continue to inspire, connect, and transform lives long after their time on Earth. It was a legacy of love, understanding, and infinite possibilities, echoing through the symphonies of infinity. The year was 2085, and the world was on the brink of a new era of exploration and discovery. The Stellar Bridges Initiative, launched 5 years earlier during William's centennial, had progressed at an astonishing pace, driven by global enthusiasm and unprecedented technological advancements. William, now 102, and Elizabeth, 100, had become living symbols of resilience, love, and vision. Though their bodies were frail with age, their minds remained sharp, fueled by the insatiable curiosity that had always defined them. On a sunny spring morning, the family gathered in the garden of William and Elizabeth's home. 4 generations were present. Sophia, now 71 years old, her children, grandchildren, and even some newborn great-grandchildren. The air was filled with anticipation, for on that day humanity would take its first concrete step toward the stars. The Stellar Bridges Initiative was about to launch its first interstellar probe, equipped with advanced inclusive communication technology. The goal was not only to explore deep space, but also to lay the groundwork for potential communication with extraterrestrial life forms, using the principles of empathy and universal understanding that William and Elizabeth had pioneered decades ago. A high-definition hologram hovered over the center of the garden, broadcasting live images from the launch center. Sophia, who was leading the project, appeared on the screen, her face a mix of emotion and determination. "Dad, Mom," she signaled, her 3-dimensional image moving fluidly. "We are about to take a giant leap, and it all started with you, with your love." William and Elizabeth, seated side by side in comfortable chairs, held each other's hands. Their eyes, though aged, shone with the same intensity as always. "It's incredible, isn't it?" William signaled, his voice softly translated by the technology that had now become an integral part of their lives. "To think that our journey to understand each other could lead to this." Elizabeth smiled, adding, "It shows that there are no limits to what love and understanding can achieve." The countdown began, and the family gathered closer, all connected. Not just physically, but through the neural technology that allowed them to share thoughts and emotions. When the probe finally launched, a wave of exultation swept through the group, amplified by their shared connection. As the probe ascended into the sky, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of billions, William and Elizabeth reflected on their extraordinary journey. From an arranged marriage to a love that inspired a global revolution in communication, and now potentially a cosmic revolution. In the days that followed, the world watched in awe as the probe transmitted its first discoveries. Using the inclusive, Communication technology developed by Sophia and her team, the probe was able to interpret and transmit data in a way that transcended traditional linguistic and sensory barriers. A month after the launch, the family gathered again for a video conference with Sophia, who was at the Mission Control Center. She had exciting news to share. The probe has detected signals that may indicate the presence of intelligent life in a nearby star system, Sophia announced, barely able to contain her excitement. And the most incredible part is that, using our inclusive communication technology, we are beginning to decipher patterns in these signals that suggest a form of language. William and Elizabeth exchanged looks of astonishment and joy. The idea that the principles of communication they had helped develop might one day facilitate contact with beings from another world was almost surreal. It's as if the universe is responding to our call for connection, Elizabeth reflected, her hands moving gracefully in the air. William nodded, adding, "Perhaps love and understanding are truly universal languages, transcending not just barriers on Earth, but in the cosmos." In the months that followed, the world watched with bated breath as efforts were made to establish meaningful communication with the supposed alien civilization. The technology developed by Sophia and her team, based on the principles of empathy and inclusion established by William and Elizabeth, proved crucial in this process. On a memorable afternoon, nearly a year after the probe's launch, the family gathered once more to witness a historic moment. Sophia appeared in the hologram, her face a mix of emotion and reverence. "We did it," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. "We have established the first meaningful contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. And do you know what the first message we exchanged with them was? Love." William and Elizabeth, surrounded by their growing family, felt a wave of emotion envelop them. Tears of joy streamed down their wrinkled faces as they absorbed the magnitude of the moment. "Our love," William gestured to Elizabeth, his voice choked with emotion, "began as a tiny spark at an arranged dinner. Now it's reaching for the stars." Elizabeth smiled, her eyes shining with love and admiration. "And it will continue to echo through the universe long after we're gone." As the sun set on that historic day, William and Elizabeth remained in the garden, surrounded by the love of their family and the promise of a future they had helped shape. Their legacy of love, understanding, and connection was no longer confined to Earth but extended into the vast and mysterious cosmos. And so, in the twilight of their lives, William and Elizabeth contemplated a new dawn for humanity. A future where love and understanding knew no bounds, where the barriers between worlds and beings could be overcome, and where the symphony of universal connection would continue to echo through the stars, forever inspired by their unlikely yet extraordinary love story.